Hey everybody, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today on John's Brief, something just a little bit different. I will explain why we're doing it this way today. But I'm sitting here in my home office and I want to talk to you today about the case of Harold Fish in Arizona, why this case was so radically important not only to Arizonans but all across the country, and several significant lessons involving this case. Firearms Legal Protection just started a 100% free monthly newsletter to bring quality, accurate information about legal self-defense to good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people like you. Go sign up for free, no-hassle help for your self-defense at the link in the description, and thank them for sponsoring today's lesson. So I know what you're used to here on John's Briefs. You're used to me sitting next to Terry Johnson or another attorney and bouncing ideas off of him as a board-certified attorney, and normally I would do that. Unfortunately, I am on isolation for the next few days because of COVID. We had a positive COVID test in the house. It's very mild, but we're isolating out of an abundance of caution. So if you're the praying type, praying for my youngest would be greatly appreciated. Super mild, think we'll be okay, but still. I want to talk to you about the case of Harold Fish. This case was really important, and this is going to take more than one part here for us to really talk about this and describe it, because it really is pretty important. What happened in this case was Harold Fish was a retired Spanish teacher from Glendale, Arizona, and he had a huge goal to hike a huge bunch of trails in Arizona, and he was up hiking near Strawberry, Arizona in the Coconino National Forest. As an aside, the Coconino is one of my favorite places in all the earth. It is beautiful up there. And he was hiking, and like he always did when he was up in the pines, he carried a 10mm 1911 to defend himself against four-legged predators, particularly the black bear population and the mountain lion population up there. Well, on this fateful day, it was May 11th, 2004, he's hiking through this area, came across a guy who was laying next to his car with three dogs next to him. That guy's named Grant Kensley, who was 43 years old and was living in the forest. This is a thing that you'll find occasionally here in Arizona. The National Forest up there has very kind of lax laws, and you'll see people that are living up there. Now, what ends up happening as he kind of walks near that guy, he waved at him. He did Harold Fish, because he wanted him to see, hey, I'm friendly, I'm not a problem, hey, it's good to see you, whatever. Well, that caused two of the three dogs to freak out and charge him. Well, he sees them coming at him down the trail, starts yelling at them to stop, and the dogs don't stop. So Harold gets his 10mm out of his backpack. It was in his hiking backpack. Gets it out of his backpack and fires a shot into the ground to stop the dogs. And it did so. It actually caused it didn't hit either dog, and it caused them to split off and kind of go to the edge of the trail. But that then caused Kensley to really freak out and come charging down the trail at Fish, and was screaming at him saying, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna hurt you, don't hurt my dogs, how dare you. Now, all that we don't have any badge cam, we don't have any surveillance footage, it's the middle of the forest, but Fish hollered at him, I didn't shoot your dogs, the dogs are okay, stop. And as the guy kept advancing and said, I'm gonna kill you, at a distance of between 5 and 8 feet, Fish fired 3 shots from his 10mm 1911, hit Kensley in the chest, and that was fatal. Now, in that moment, what we know is after that went down, Fish put his backpack underneath that guy's head, covered him with a blanket, and then tried to use his own cell phone for service. His cell phone didn't have service. I can tell you up in the Coconino, very common, especially back then in 2004. And so he walked all the way to the road and then flagged down a passing motorist who used OnStar to contact authorities. Authorities came out and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Kensley was. Fish was not harmed in this. Now, the original responding deputy who did the original kind of investigation here said that it was clearly a self-defense case. In fact, I think the investigating officers as well, deputies, said that this was self-defense. However, the prosecutor disagreed and ended up charging Fish with second-degree murder, which is murder without malice aforethought. So this is non-premeditated murder in the state of Arizona. And so there was a long drawn out trial. That trial didn't end until middle of 2006. And at the end of that trial, Harold Fish was convicted of second-degree murder. Now, I'm going to kind of push through all the way to the end of the story, because in 2009, his conviction was overturned by the Arizona Supreme Court, who remanded the case back to the lower court because of some errors in the instructions that were given and some errors in what was admitted into evidence in that case, and he was remanded to a new trial. In the interim, the Coconino County District Attorney said that he wouldn't retry him because of a couple things. In Arizona at the time, in 2006, while this trial was going on, the Arizona legislature changed the laws on self-defense and a claim of self-defense in court in order to, from the burden going from the defendant having to prove that it was self-defense and an affirmative defense, and change the burden of proof to the prosecution being required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not self-defense. So the burden of proof shifted in self-defense cases in Arizona in 2006. And they did so in such a way that the law was actually called the Harold Fish Law, because it was applied retroactively to anyone who was being tried while the law was passed. So from the time the law was passed, not when the actions were made, but when the trial was held, there was only one of those in the entire state. It was Harold Fish, so it was called the Harold Fish Law. Under that, they decided not to prosecute him again. And so he was a free man at that point. He spent around $700,000 on his defense all the way through the appellate process. And unfortunately, in 2012, Harold Fish died of cancer. And so he left his family with a significant liability, a significant debt from himself, from freeing himself, and from the 3 years that he spent in prison. So I want to talk a little bit about some of what went down there and why that is so important to us as self-defenders, and maybe think through some of the reasons why we go, okay, wait a minute, what are some of the lessons that we can learn from that? Number one, I'm grateful that Harold stayed in the fight and that he worked very closely with our state level organizations like the Arizona Citizens Defense League to get that law changed. And these were the kinds of cases that really changed the tenor of self-defense laws, not only in Arizona, but the nation. Now, every state's a little different on this, but pretty much throughout the nation today, it is an affirmative defense to say that, hey, I defended myself. And if there's any evidence of self-defense, you can't just claim self-defense with no evidence whatsoever. Has to have some evidence. But once it is admitted as a potential defense, this is what's called an affirmative defense. I affirm that I have done the thing that you said I did. I did indeed shoot that person. So you are affirming, stipulating to the fact that you did shoot that person. But you're saying I was justified in doing so. I was right to do that thing, not wrong. So normally it would be wrong to do the thing. I say it's right to do the thing because of this other reason. That's an affirmative defense. So he made that affirmative defense, but then to change the presumption from the defendant having to prove that what they did was right to changing it to what the prosecution had to prove that they were wrong was a very good change for self-defense law in Arizona. So I would strongly encourage all of you, get involved in your local and state level organizations. I personally am a lifetime member of the Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association. I am a life member of AZCDL, and so I'd recommend all Arizonans, please be a part of those. Those are very important. But for you to be a part of those in your level as well, in your state, because of how important they are. The next thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about why we really want to be cautious on how we approach these things, because here's the reality of things is that things aren't always going to go our way, and what we think of as a very strong case might still wind us up in prison if we make some significant mistakes. And so there were some significant mistakes here. I think the biggest thing here was the change in the law. I think forcing a defendant to prove that they were justified rather than say, no, they get the benefit, the presumption of justification, and then beyond a reasonable doubt, the prosecutor has to prove that they were not justified in what they did by attacking their claim of self-defense on multiple levels. Now, the prosecutor did that on multiple levels, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But what I want to say here in the beginning on this one is why I think having incredibly courageous but also highly competent representation is so important. You know, you don't want to be flipping through the yellow pages on that day, okay? A big to-do here is you don't want to say, oh, okay, wait a minute, I just need to go find an attorney. You want to have that done ahead of time. Straight up, 100%, no question about it. You want the highest level of representation that you can have. So you don't want an attorney who's fresh out of law school here. You want somebody who's got a track record of these kinds of things. And of course, that's what Harold Fish had, and that's why it cost him so much. So the second part of that, of course, is I am going to recommend that you have representation and that you get it with Firearms Legal Protection and become a member. Now, I know people are going to have different opinions on what's the best company. I can tell you that we just renewed our contract with Firearms Legal Protection for me not only to be an ambassador for them, but I'm now also a consulting expert for Firearms Legal Protection. So if you're a member of Firearms Legal Protection and you're involved in a defensive encounter, I am part of the team who will consult with your attorney, who is a local attorney, an attorney who is barred in your state, who is an expert in the laws of your state, to help and make sure that you get the most robust defense possible. And that's one of the things that we now have for all Firearms Legal Protection members. I'm very proud to do that. Why? They vet their attorneys very carefully, but you get to choose which attorney that you want in the end. In the end, it's a relationship between you and your attorney that matters, and you want the best one possible. And of course, they've already vetted several and said, hey, here's ones we know are competent and good, know what they're doing, and have your best interests in mind. And they've contracted already for the fees. And so you don't have to worry about that. You don't got to worry about the $700,000 bill in your legal defense. Now, hopefully, again, that becomes much less and we stay way away from some things. And there's another lesson about that. But I think the Harold Fish case really teaches us a few things. You can do the right thing. In the end, Harold was exonerated. He was justified in what he did. He did in that moment exactly what he had to do, did, quite frankly, everything right. And yet he still was punished with the process. And you should expect to be punished with the process as well. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen. What really happened here at the end of the day is that the district attorney, it was an election year, and the district attorney needed to get reelected and decided, I'm going to prosecute Harold Fish. Made the case to the place where he made a case that the jury ended up agreeing with because of some evidentiary rules that the judge misinterpreted. Now, of course, that went to the appellate court and then to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court finally said, no, those were wrong decisions. That was a foul on the play. Try it again and get that decision right this time. And in light of that, the prosecution said, nope, I can't win a case with those rules in that way. And so with the rules correctly applied, the prosecution didn't have a case. And so this was kind of, honestly, it was malicious prosecution. And so you can be prosecuted like that. Now, I will tell you, I think having somebody on your side in advance so that you know at least you're not going to lose all of your financial future. Now, you're still going to have to go to court. If you end up in prison like Harold did, they're not going to serve your prison time, but paying for all of the criminal defense, all of the civil defense, all of the appeals process, all the way to the Supreme Court, and you're a robust legal team that's the very best that is available, and with national level experts and with attorneys that are specialists in your area in self-defense, I think it's a good reason to have one of those. Now, next video, what we're going to talk about is we are going to talk about some of the mistakes that Harold made that weren't, I'm not giving him a hard time, but there were a couple of things in the case in terms of what happened in the immediate aftermath that really caused Harold some problems that don't cause people problems today because of how we do things. But I'm going to talk about some of those mistakes and why we encourage people to do things the way that we do them in a self-defense case when those things go down. In the end, I think Harold, again, came out of it okay, but paid a heavy price and lost 3 incredibly important years that he should have been spending with his children, some of whom were very young, and then he died way too young. And certainly the stress of what happened in his life was part of that. So, we wish the best to his remaining family. He's still got kids here in Glendale and his wife as well, as far as I know. And next time, again, this one, have a representation ahead of time. Know that when you're going to use defensive force ahead of time. Be a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person ahead of time. Next time, we're going to talk about the aftermath of what immediately happened afterwards, and some of what the jury said was the biggest problem, and in so doing, what led to some of his bigger problems and how we can avoid them.